welcome everyone to episode 13 of the
Mhm.
Aha Moment podcast. I am co-host Amanda Kaczurka here with my co-host Elizabeth Sapola.
Hello.
And we are excited to welcome our very special guest today. We have Erin Green with us today. And Erin is the owner of Verify Services. She's also a profit first financial consultant, helping businesses get a better handle on their numbers. Super
Mhm.
important. And she's going to talk a little bit about that. But what we're really here to talk about today is this concept of leaning into fear for the purpose of growth. And I think our friend Erin here has plenty of experience doing that.
Yes, one of my favorite topics, as you know, and super excited to pick your brain, Erin, and to hear even some of your personal story regarding how this became such an instrumental topic in your life that really helped you to even pivot and make a change of direction for your career.
Absolutely. So before we jump into some content, Erin, we want to learn a little bit more about you for our listeners who don't know you yet. Would you share a little bit about you and your background and what brought you here today to leaning into your fear and growing?
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'd like to thank both of you for having me. I started my first business in 2001. I was introduced to Amanda in 2013 when I realized, geez, I have a lot to learn about running a business. I was really great at my skill in my craft. Running the business was a whole nother, that was my aha moment. And I was like, wow, there's a lot to learn. And I've coached with hundreds of women at this point, and that's like a reoccurring theme. Like people start a business because they're good at one thing, and then they're like, oh shoot, I need to get good at these other things. And fear, a lot of people run from fear. I kind of like to run into fear
Mhm.
because it forces me to do things I might not have done otherwise. And when I look back at what I've done over the last 4 or 5 years, I'm like, oh my gosh, if it wasn't for fear, there's so many things I wouldn't have had. I wouldn't have experienced the beauty of so many different things.
So thank you for sharing that. I'm listening to what you just shared with us through the lens of the listeners, and I'm just curious if maybe you can give a little glimpse into what your original skill set was that led you into starting your own business. And just so that some of our listeners can relate to some of what you shared, when was it that you started leaning into fears instead of running away from it? Or were you always hardwired that way?
Gosh, I had to really think about this. Being with you ladies today, the question seems simple, but then I'm like, I have to like really think about it because I realize that I've really embraced this so much. It's just part of who I am.
Right.
It's kind of like if you know how to do algebra and then you have to teach somebody else how to do it. It takes a minute to take a step back. And you're like, how did I go from there to here? Because it's been quite the evolution. Um, I guess my biggest first leap into fear. So my first career, I was a registered nurse. And in 1995, there was a parent of one of my son's friends that kept encouraging me to take a sales job. It is
Hmm.
not natural to go from nursing to a sales job.
No, definitely
There's
not.
no natural transition whatsoever, but I did it anyhow. During the pandemic, when selling our services at Verify were difficult, I wanted to get some additional training. That's when I got certified as a cash flow expert. No correlation between the two, really.
Right. Right.
I decided last summer I wanted to be a real estate investor. Has nothing to do with anything I've ever done. I just want to do it. And
Mhm.
so I have learned and leaned into coaching, but I've also learned and leaned into fear because it's what's pulled me through some of these transitions. And um, hopefully that answers what you're asking. But it's
Yes.
always a leap of faith. It's trusting in myself. Like I know that I can't fail at anything because I will learn something that will propel me to the next thing. So yes, I have fear, but my fear is never a failure. My fear is regret.
I love that. And another thing, another very important ingredient that goes into the story you just shared about a high level overview of your own journey is you also gave yourself permission to be curious, right? You didn't
Yeah.
turn your mind off to what if. And in addition to that, the what ifs you thought about were spun positively in your mind, correct? What if I did this? What if I explored that? Whereas a lot of people, and I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to what I'm about to share, might struggle with the what ifs negatively spun. Ooh,
Yeah.
what if this goes wrong? What if I'm not good enough? Can you
Mhm.
speak to that a little bit? The curiosity factor?
Yeah, curious. I've rewired. I used to always say nosy's my best quality, but nosy's negative. I am inherently very curious. And so it's just I will learn something from every single person I meet from now until the day I die. Like everybody has something to teach us if we're open to listening. So just that curiosity and just a ferocious need to learn new things. I think that that's really helped quite a bit as well.
Great.
I think it's easy sometimes for people who don't have that curious mindset to kind of get trapped into comfort, if you will. So, you know, everybody has those comfort traps that they fall into, and they keep us stuck. And so breaking out of those is a challenge. So for anybody who's maybe feeling a little bit stuck in a comfort trap or doesn't necessarily recognize but is just feeling sort of stuck, what would your advice be to them?
My advice is to really evaluate like where is the fear coming from?
Mm,
Because as humans, we're wired to protect ourselves. And so a lot of fear is really just your nervous system trying to protect you from making a stupid mistake, right? Um,
Mhm.
and so I really have learned to just, really take a step back and think about like, why am I feeling fearful? Where am I actually like feeling it in my body? I've just learned over time if my fear makes me feel nauseated, that's kind of a red flag for me. Like, okay, like I need to dig a lot deeper before I take that next step. If
mhm,
it's just kind of the kind of fear where I have like the little butterflies or I feel a little, sometimes fear takes our breath away. If it's some
mhm,
of those things, but I've analyzed like my inputs and what the potential outputs would be, and that feels like intellectually okay.
mhm,
Then sometimes I just hear I had a business coach a few years ago that used to say, just jump.
mhm,
Mhm.
As entrepreneurs, I mean, we really do. I mean, if you had to know everything before you started a business, you would be stuck in perfectionism, which
yeah.
is the killer of all progress. Um, but sometimes you just have to jump. I find that the women that I work with that can't sometimes just jump, it's because they don't trust themselves.
Yes,
Mhm,
absolutely. And you spoke to this just a couple moments ago regarding fear. I know you've heard of this acronym before, Erin. I'm sure many of our listeners have. It's a good reminder, fear, false evidence appearing real. And really that part of our brain, the amygdala, it can hijack us into getting into that fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode because to your earlier point, it's trying to protect us. However, anyone who's ever heard of an amygdala hijack, and if you haven't, Google it, look it up. But anyone who's heard of it knows that it tells us things that aren't real. It causes us to fear things that don't need to be feared.
mhm,
So I love the pointers you gave regarding paying attention to where in your body you're holding that fear because that can be a clue as to, ooh, is it something I need to really follow my gut? And in your example of where you feel it in your actual stomach, when you know, ooh, I have to stop, you want
Yeah,
to follow your gut feel, right?
mhm.
that's
But that's
exactly right.
excellent. I love that.
Yeah, very good advice.
Mhm.
Um, so I'd love for you to think a little bit more specifically about one of the many pivots that you've made throughout your life up to this point, and talk a little bit about what triggered that feeling of, hey, I think it's time to lean into fear and try something else. What was it that you were afraid of, and what did you learn?
Ooh, that's a big question, Amanda. Um, I actually just recorded on this yesterday for social media, and it is just, first of all, success leaves clues. So when we want to jump and pivot and try something different, and the amygdala tries to hijack you, I'm looking for, okay, what are the external clues that I can be successful? Like, what have I done that's similar to this that I can build on? Who do I need to talk to? Is there a coach that I need to hire? Like, what do I need to do to help me push past this area of discomfort? But like the most obvious things for me over the past couple of years are my living situations. So I moved from Pennsylvania to California, knew, less than a handful of people when I moved there. Had a beautiful time and a beautiful life there for about a year and a half. And then I decided that I wanted to be a digital nomad. So I did that for about a year and a half. I bought an RV. Every day was an adventure. Every day was reinventing myself and figuring out my logistics for the day. So when I said I had to like take a step back and think about how am I doing these things, because it's just really kind of hardwired in who I am right now. Last summer, while traveling in my RV, I decided I wanted to move to Cleveland, Ohio, and start buying investment properties. And so it's just this evolution of, okay, here's where I am and this is where I want to go. Here's the skills that I have, here's the gaps that I have. And it's just this kind of quick and immediate evaluation of what skills and resources do I have and what do I need to find to help me have the courage to take that next step.
Where do you see this translate to businesses or even leaders in nonprofit organizations where they have so much more potential than they see because they're so myopic in their thinking, and they're not even, it's very difficult to open their minds and their eyes to seeing opportunities because they're just talking themselves out of it, right? Negotiating against themselves before they can even get to a point to imagine something different. What can you give us some very practical experience for people listening to this in their work lives of how they
Mhm.
can combat those thoughts?
So for me, it's like what is the overarching vision?
Mhm.
Always, like not even just the company vision, but the personal vision. We have company core values, but I also have my personal core values. And so when I'm looking at doing something new, I'm like, does it align with my company and my personal core values? How is this driving my why forward? Going back to my why a lot of times helps me push through fear too, because I'm like, I'm going to allow this dumb little fear over this dumb little thing hold me back from my why? Absolutely not. Like my why is built for me. Everybody's different, but for me, it's building a legacy for my grandson's grandchildren. Like that's really what I'm here to do. That's my purpose. And it goes that deep. And so some little things that I might feel fearful for, like I have it wired in me that I have to answer to my purpose. I have to answer to my why. And I'm not going to tell those things I didn't do it because I was afraid. I'm going to tell those things I didn't do it because it didn't make sense, or the goalpost changed, or I evaluated it and like logistically, it's just not going to happen. But I answer to my why. And if it like I have to answer to that and be accountable for that. Also, again, business coaching helps me tremendously. There is a thing called Pearson's Law, which says that which gets measured improves. That which gets measured and reported on improves exponentially. So that level of accountability has really helped me move things forward.
And I should also mention, you're not doing all of this alone. Rumor has it you have a little buddy who's with you all the time. Can you speak to how your little buddy played into being a big part of being on your team to help you through all of this?
Yeah, so Sherman is my 11-pound Chihuahua, for those who don't know. And yes, he just brings me so much joy. And I'm like, he's not afraid of anything. Why do I need to be afraid of anything? Like, just like sometimes I'm like, just go after your goals like Sherman goes after a bone. You just gotta go. Like sometimes you just gotta put your head down and you just gotta go. You don't even need to know why. Just if you've done the analysis and you can get it right with your body and your head, just move. Just move.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One other quick question, because as our listeners and we are hearing you speak, one thing that keeps crossing my mind is the reality that every listener, every person has a different risk appetite.
Yes.
So are there any words of wisdom you can share for those who on the spectrum of risk appetite might be far to the left of a lower appetite for risk than those listening who are further to the right? And can you relate to anybody who's further to the left with a low risk appetite? Was that ever you?
Probably not, but I can relate because I work
Mhm.
with lots of clients who have a low risk tolerance. Again, it's back to your goals and what are you going to allow to get in the way of your goals, number one. But it's also like going to the gym. Like if you haven't exercised that muscle in a while, it hurts. It's going to scream at you a little bit. And so it's going back to the why and what you want to accomplish and how do you get over that hump? Maybe it's just the discipline of doing, even when you're not seeing the immediate results. I think so often we want immediate results, and lasting change and impact doesn't happen overnight.
It does not. It does not. And if you continue to chase the immediate results, you're going to miss the bigger opportunities
Mhm.
for sure. We see that time and time again, don't
Yes,
we?
we do. Certainly do.
Not in our lives, of course,
No,
but through the
never.
work we do. I've never done that. Just joking.
Yes, I do
We
not
can all
put my
relate.
hand, I don't put my hand back on any stoves once I've learned my lesson.
Right. Never.
Never. If only.
I also want to go back to something you said that I really liked about making sure there's alignment with not only the organizational values, but your own personal values as well. And that's an exercise that we take a lot of people through as they go through leadership and training programs with us. Is going through the exercise of identifying what are your own personal core values. I think as humans, that's not something we do
No,
regularly or naturally even.
no, and even there's one example
Mhm.
that I can think of because we work with a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders, we do a lot of coaching, and there was one client in particular years ago who I remember we were going through the exercise of core values and they said, "This is stupid, it's a waste of time. I realized what my core values were. I did this back when I was a freshman in college," and they were far beyond being a freshman in college.
Mhm.
So, can you speak to anyone hearing today's episode who might be thinking, yeah, I thought about my values through a intro to management lecture, back when I was 18, right out of high school. Speak to the importance of the core values and re-examining those and reevaluating those.
So I'll speak to it both professionally and personally. So professionally, I think it's very important because it helps as a leader, it helps ensure when executed properly, it helps ensure that what's important to you, the values that you want, the culture that you want to create are disseminated throughout your organization. To me, that's
Right.
critically important because I spend more I own two businesses and I spend more time in one than the other. So it's almost it helps. It's like that glue. It's that continuity, whether you're in the day to day or not, the culture that you've created and the culture that you've intended continues.
Right.
Um, both internally with internal interactions, but also as your team projects outward into the world, like the world is getting a consistent message, consistent behaviors. But then also personally, it's important, my personal core values are very different than my business core values. As an example, one of my personal core values is that I will not invest my time, money, or energy in anything where it doesn't multiply. And so on a business and a personal level, I'm looking at, okay, if I do this work in this business, does it grow? I am not looking for a one-to-one exchange. I can't grow a business when I've got, 60 seconds of input equals 60 seconds of output. That's not growing anything exponentially. But it's also personally, as I evaluate my personal relationships. It's not to say that people don't, in the course of a relationship that, it doesn't flow back and forth, where sometimes you have 10% and your friend, your spouse, your partner has 90%. But it's also, there are people in your life that divide.
Yes, there are.
And not on a temporary basis. I've learned that we overgivers attract over receivers. And so it helps me evaluate personal relationships as well.
That's really well said.
Yes, I like that.
You bring up an interesting point. So I think, and you kind of play this role too. So it's interesting. You lean into fear yourself for growth, but you also support other people as they're leaning into fear for growth. So can you talk about how you play that role? And if somebody's listening to this, knowing that they want to be a support person for someone who's trying to lean into their fear to grow, what does that look like? How can they be a good support person?
Again, I'm tying back to their why. Like, why do you want to grow? Like, what do you get from that? And does this risk outweigh that or not? But it really is asking questions that help them lead themselves to usually they already have the answer anyhow. They're lacking the permission slip. And so what makes sense for you going forward? What's your why? And never giving them like, you should do this, you should do that. It's, have you considered? I do a lot of experience sharing, when I've had a similar situation, this is how I handled it. This was the outcome. So it's really just sparking a conversation that doesn't end when the Zoom ends. Like, even saying to a client, why don't you go journal? Here's a few prompts. Here's some things that you might want to think through as you're making this decision.
And
sometimes I tell them, just jump. You're ready.
Right.
Success leaves clues. Like that's one of my biggest things. Success leaves clues. Because
another thing you've said, Erin, before, I've heard you say it before outside of this episode that I want to draw upon is one of the clues is the fact that you're even considering something different. Once the wheels are in motion of even considering it, there's already momentum that's started.
That's right.
I remember you have shared that with me before about different things. And even some of the most basic clues are clues, but we can overlook it.
Yeah, it's so easy when, you're moving fast and you're trying to grow and you've got the pressure of a team and other people. And, there's also the people in the world that want to see you fail like that. I mean, that is true. It's just remembering like, this is my purpose. This is my call. This is why I'm doing these things.
And another thing I think is maybe important for leaning into the fear for growth is there, and for some people who are interested in doing that, but maybe don't want to completely let go of every semblance of feeling control.
Right.
Because I know that's tough for a lot of people.
It is.
Myself included. Awareness, right? So we think about building systems that do provide some stability in other areas of our lives and work when we are leaning into fear in other directions. So what are some of the ways that you've kind of kept that groundedness, for lack of a better word, when you're leaning into fear and otherwise leaping in other areas?
Sometimes it's just really like, okay, I want to go from here to here. Like, I don't have to, I don't need to zap myself to here. I need to walk myself to here. And so sometimes it's like, what's that one step that I can take? Because the whole process might be scary, but if I could break the process down into steps, like what's that one thing that I need to do to move myself forward? And then I can do that and then pause. Because I think high achievers don't like to pause. They like to just keep going. And so sometimes the power is in that pause. Oh,
Right.
wow. Look what I just did. I've got this scary long process, but I took this one first step and look how well it turned out. Look what I learned. How can I build on that? Like, what's the next one step? And so it's sometimes it's just what's one step. Like we don't have to jump or teleport ourselves from here to there. We can crawl, we can walk before we learn how to run. And pretty soon it just gets to be kind of this automatic process that happens within the head. You're like, okay, I know I can do this because I just did these other 10 steps. And before I did
Right.
those, I didn't think I could. Look what I
Right.
did.
Can you give some advice to people who might be listening and everything you're saying sounds great, but and also they truly are scared out of their minds and they're frozen in fear to even take that one little step. What advice would you give to those individuals who are
So
frozen in fear?
people love crossing things off a to-do list. So if you can translate that fear of getting from here to there and write down the steps, like what are the 10 steps to get you from here to there? Even if you have to take one step at a time and say, okay, well, this step has 3 things. Let me get one of those done today. Let me celebrate that. And then I can come back tomorrow and do one more. It really is just a series. Like we didn't go from, rolling back and forth to running. We learned how to crawl and then we learned how to walk. And so it's just this series of allowing yourself and releasing yourself from the fear of failure and stepping into the power of curiosity. Like, what if I take this step? What if it doesn't go the way I want and I learn something? Or what if it doesn't go the way I want and it actually turns out better?
Right.
Either way, I took a step and I either learned something. I learned something either way. I learned what doesn't
Sure.
work or I learned what did work. I can build on either of those 2 things.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's so important to remember, especially for those who, as you just said, you are, tend to be
Mhm.
perfectionistic, right?
Yes, I think there's so much to celebrate in the baby steps and achieving one thing at a time and just moving to, what's the next thing and then the next thing and then the next thing. And then before you know it, you're,
Mm-hmm.
100 yards from where you started. And so I think for people like me, especially who do get really fixated on the perfectionist side of things,
Mm-hmm.
taking it a baby step at a time
Mm-hmm.
is a great way to approach it.
Absolutely. And in what you shared, Erin, and I'm only sharing this, I think it's good for our listeners to maybe identify with themselves in all 3 of our perspectives. I tend to be someone who doesn't like to pause
Hmm.
and celebrate because my brain is constantly, okay, great. How can I do it better next time? How can we do it better next time?
Mhm.
And I think to Erin's point earlier, it's also extremely important to celebrate how far you've come and to give yourself permission to pause and look from where you came.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think as a leader, it's really like critically important to learn the skill of pausing and celebrating. I can tell you, it was probably about 3 months ago. I had a team meeting with my financial coaching team, and they thought it was to roll out the goals for the next quarter. And so we pop on Zoom. There's 4 of us. We pop on, and they want to start rolling into what we're doing. And I'm like, time out. We're not talking about next quarter. We're going to talk about the quarter we just had. Well, what do you mean we're done? No, we're not done. We haven't celebrated it yet. And
Mhm.
so I went through like, here's the goals that each of us have, and here's where we've met them, here's where we exceeded them. And this call is after we celebrate. I'm like, okay, this call's now over. They're like, well, what are we doing next quarter? You'll figure that out on the next call. Like we are literally pausing to celebrate the success we just had. We all rolled up our sleeves and pushed hard. That's cause for celebration. We don't need to cloud it with what's next. Like we're like literally pausing. And it is, that was uncomfortable.
I'm sure, because I think especially for people, I think about how I'm hardwired. It's always like to the next thing, and you too, to the next thing, to the next
Mhm.
thing, to the next thing. And I think especially as we get older and, more into our career paths and we get so focused on growth and competition and what's next and how do we keep growing, how do we keep moving, that celebration piece really just falls to the wayside and it's so important.
And
Isn't it
without,
easy?
oh, go
Go
on,
ahead.
Erin.
I was just gonna say it's a really easy fix. Just add it to the bottom of your checklist.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. We started, this is something I know we started, gosh, maybe 5 years ago,
at least, yeah.
at least, but actually scheduling in to the agenda when we get together on a weekly basis as an entire team to celebrate wins in
That's
the
how we start
beginning.
our practice meeting, our staff
Yes.
meetings every week is
Yes.
with wins to celebrate.
And we've had pushback sometimes from
Mhm.
team members who've said, "Oh, this is a waste of time," right? It's like, no, no, we're going to celebrate. And I can believe me, sometimes it's painful for me too. However, when we celebrate our wins, it also helps to reinforce being very intentional
Mhm.
about the choices we make
Yes,
and the thought process that goes into the choices we make for what's next.
absolutely.
So it serves many purposes.
It does for sure.
That's a great
So
point.
to summarize some things that we've talked about today. So Erin, I think you shared the great advice of,
Mhm.
leaning into that leap. And if you've got to break it down into smaller pieces, that's fine. But recognizing when you're receiving the signals of, I think it's time to try something new. And sometimes those signals hit you over the head, and sometimes they're maybe a little bit subtle. So there is an art of, I think that's where the getting curious and listening and being open to when you're getting those signals and paying attention to them.
Right.
And I think that's also where it's helpful to have coaches or mentors or people who are close to you who can maybe help point out when there's something that you might be missing,
Absolutely.
because we don't always acknowledge that ourselves easily.
No, we don't. It's easy to have blind spots.
Mhm. Yeah, for
Yes.
sure.
And another thing, psst, I'm talking to you, Mr. or Mrs. Listener. If you have tuned in to this, you've made a choice to join us. And if you continued with us all the way through towards the end of this segment as we prepare to wrap, that's your clue.
Yes,
Right? That is your
it's a
clue.
sign.
It's a
If you're listening to
sign.
this episode and you're
Yes.
thinking, take the steps.
Right. Lean into it. Stop waiting. Start moving.
Have this be your jump off. So, Erin, before we close, if there's one final key takeaway that you'd like to share with somebody listening to today's episode, what would you share?
I would just say believe in yourself. Look around you for the clues that success has left you. Ask yourself, what about this new opportunity or challenge is making me feel uncomfortable? And then just creating that checklist, because we all love to cross things off a checklist. So it kind of tricks the brain into moving forward. Not that you necessarily want to, but you can't not uncheck. You've just got to keep checking things off. And so it's a way of moving yourself forward.
There is something that feels just really satisfying about
Oh,
driving
it's so
through.
gratifying. And even though both my companies, we have ticketing systems that keep everything straight, I still have a written to-do list every day because I love scratching stuff off. And if it's been a brutal day, I'm scratching those things off like 3 times because it feels even better.
And circling them, Xing them
Yeah.
out.
Whatever you need. Yeah.
I like when I put a D next to some of them, which means delegate next time.
Oh,
I like that.
that's good.
That
That's
is
Yeah,
good.
like why, I look at that list and I'm like, why am I doing these things? That's a
Right.
D. That's a D.
Right.
awesome. Well, thank you, Erin, for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing some time with us and talking all about this topic of leaning into fear for growth. It's one that you certainly have a ton of experience with, and we encounter people all the time who could really benefit from, the expertise that you have in this particular area. So thank you for sharing your
And
experiences.
I'd like to give you a chance to do a little plug for your business.
Mhm.
Both, either or. Would you like to say anything about your businesses so listeners check them out?
Sure. So, Verify is a project management firm that I started in 2001. We install and manage, oh geez, voice, internet, cellular, gas, electric, efficiency projects for clients across the country. Always a focus on cost reduction and efficiency. Love the work that we do there. And then Trinity Growth Advisors is the firm that I started in the pandemic, where I help female-owned service-based businesses not only grow the profit in their business, but also grow their wealth and their impact in this world. And we do that through, cash flow forecasting and a lot of other financial systems that lead to clarity and get rid of all of the overwhelm.
Mhm.
Love it.
Excellent. And I know you're also very closely affiliated with a bank that is a women-owned bank and entirely serves female clients as well, or customers. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Impresia Bank. I was on the steering committee that helped to create the framework for Impresia Bank. It was launched a couple of years ago. I now sit on the steering committee, and it has just been an absolute joy to see how the bank has embraced and really taken up many levels from, like the traditional banks will have women's programs, but this is a bank specifically designed for women and how we approach business differently. And they've done a brilliant job with building community education. It's been definitely part of my legacy work.
For sure.
Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you again, Erin, for joining us. Please be sure to join us for the next episode. We're going to be featuring another new Decision Associates team member. Our last episode featured Nikki Moberly. Next episode is going to feature Dan Belena. Dan is joining us from the Pittsburgh area, and he and Elizabeth are going to be talking a little bit about peer groups and how peer groups can really positively impact, especially for executive leaders who maybe don't have that group of people or even that person to bounce ideas off of and just kind of brainstorm and be a support for each other. So Dan and Elizabeth are going to talk all about that on our next episode. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Aha Moment. As a reminder, please subscribe on Spotify if you want to make sure you're notified of every upcoming episode so you never miss one, because they're all so good.
They are.
So make sure you do that. And then if you'd like to check us out, Decision Associates online, we are decisionassociates.net for our website. And then as Decision Associates on LinkedIn, we post lots of great content here in addition to our episodes. So check that out as well. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all
Thank
our
you for
listeners
having
as
me.
well.